and welcome to another Friday artwork flip through. Although the flip through piece of this video could be quite short, I'll do what I normally do here. So I'm gonna go through the with the full card on camera, and then we'll zoom in. But as you can see here, probably guess the stack is quite small. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, what I should have done is done these cards when I did the original artifact flip through. That would have made more sense, but didn't think about that at the time. So as a bonus, and to make this video slightly longer, I'm going to look at this book, and we'll get on to this one, the official deck builder's guide. It captures a really interesting time in Magic, and just the way it's executed. I got the impression from what I'd read that it wasn't super popular. I could be wrong, but in some ways, for the reasons that it wasn't popular, I really like it, and we'll talk about why in a moment. So let's flip through these. Again, they're roughly in chronological order in which they were printed, and these are the only multicolored cards from which have older borders on them that I've pulled from repacks, from the Dollarama repacks. And as you will see, there's not many. Now, what's going to be nice, of course, as a result of this being the last of the videos which look at older borders or older bordered cards that I pulled from repacks, it does mean that next flip through video I do for Friday is going to be older sets. So I'm going to have a particular set, possibly going back to Ice Age, could be going back earlier than that. We'll see whether I've got enough cards to look at a particular set in detail. So I'm going to flip through to a different view on the camera, and we'll start looking close up at the artwork. So let's get up close with the artwork here. It's always interesting with the multicolored cards in older sets, in terms of the border, just how different it was. It does give the cards a completely different look. So I'm now going to zoom out a bit further. I'll probably have to remove the cheese board, sadly, to do that. And we'll take a look at this book, and I'll talk a little bit about it. So I have a number of what I suppose you could call historically significant Magic the Gathering books, which were produced in, what's the best word to use for this? Which were, officially produced and released and sanctioned by Wizards of the Coast. Although I think a few of these were maybe released under different publishers. I could be wrong. And this is referred to as the official deck builder's guide. Now, one of the reasons why I find them so interesting is they capture a particular time in Magic, and as a result you start to see some very strange things covered in these. And when I first bought the book, it wasn't my favourite. I've got a number of books that are about deck building and about Magic cards that have been sanctioned by WotC, but this one sort of grew on me, and I'll sort of try and explain why. So this was released in 1997. This video going out now is also very relevant because it's a time period that I've been covering in a lot of my deck musings videos, around 97. I've been moving around a little bit, but generally in that area. So this was released just before Tempest was due to be released. So we had the whole of the Mirage block out, and we had the, I suppose, 5th edition. Yeah, 5th edition. And also at that time they were, trying to get a hold on exactly what would be in standard type 2. And the nice thing about this book as well is it sort of lays out, I'm trying to be careful here because as you can see it's starting to fall apart, the different deck types they're covering. So there's sections in this, and these are fascinating. So we have a section on 5th edition using all commons. So so we've got Pauper here, but using just a specific set to do that. We've got decks built using Portal as well. Decks for type 2. Decks built just using cards from Mirage block. Decks from Ice Age, because that was currently part of type 2 still. It hadn't rotated out at that point. Then it's got classic type 1, some theme decks. Now with these theme decks there's a number of different things covered, and we'll take a look at that when we flip through. We've got multiplayer decks which don't really conform to a particular deck count in terms of cards or card count. We've got extended as well here. We've got classic restricted, and then we have a special section on the soon to be released Tempest, which was decks that were specifically put together by R&D. So it says these decks will not be listed in the context or indices. No more than can be said, because the author will only discover their contents by reading this book after it's been published. So apparently the author didn't even know, supposedly, what was in the decks. They were just added before this book was printed. So I have built a couple of these, and I think I may have featured them in a video way back. So what they did is they basically, or the author here, put together a series of decks, and they're all 2-colour decks. So there's 10 of them, and they're all constructed from 5th edition cards. So they're all, each from one from each of the 2-colour combinations. Then we get onto the Portal deck. So these are decks using only the cards from Portal. I suppose it was a simplified Magic the Gathering set, of which I think we've had at least one card feature in my flip throughs, where I actually ended up with a Portal card from a Dollarama Repack. We've got type 2, some of which you might recognise, similar decks to what we've covered in the set music episode. You see we've got a big blue deck here, although I didn't specifically use this book as my resource. It could be the case that you know, the deck list may be very similar, if not the same. We've got Control, we've got Counterburn, Black Ice, Green Weenie. Oh, look, there's a Land Destruction deck, Meta Weenie. It doesn't really mention specifically what tournament these came from. I have another Magic the Gathering book which goes through archetypes from so decks that have been covered in the Magic the Gathering magazine, and then it sort of updates the deck list over time, and that one definitely does pull from various tournaments and mentions what tournaments it does. This doesn't. This deck doesn't. And look, there's Prosperous Blue, Pox, Predicted Damage, Reanimator, Sly deck there, Speed, Stasis, White Weenie. Then we have just Mirage block decks, and it's interesting because in the, I think at least, yeah, probably two episodes of deck musings that I recorded before this video has gone out, I have talked about decks specifically from, was it Pro Tour Paris, which was a Mirage block event. However, I think because of the timing of this book, these decks could cover the whole of the Mirage block. And I'm not sure if that particular Pro Tour tournament, I don't think the third set of the block was out by then. So, you know, you may well find that these particular decks are quite different than decks that may have turned up in the Paris Pro Tour, which was from '97, which was a you know, a block Pro Tour. Mirage block Pro Tour. Then we have Ice Age block decks. What's interesting about these is some of them, you can, I would say, I don't know, there's certain things here which you might possibly see also in the Type 1 decks that are covered, maybe. But these would be purely, you know, have to be cards from Ice Age block. I think it's the block rather than just the set. Let me just check that again. Yeah, Ice Age Homelands and Alliances. Yeah, so at going to press still fits in with the DC Type 2. Okay. So this was on an interesting cusp. And then we get on to the Type 1. So all the classic Type 1 stuff. Speed, hands are a little cold. I'm having trouble flipping through these. Yeah, so theme decks based on loads of different themes. We've got one's based on art. And then we've got one's based on creatures. It also has a rough estimate of the cost of the decks at the time. And then we have a whole load of theme decks that are based on cards from Fallen Empires, which is quite amusing. You can see the cost is very low. So these are all, you know, creature decks. There's a black, blue, green, red, and white, so one from each of the colours, and a sideboard. And then we have some sort of general theme decks. So there's what would that be? Goblins. This must be merfolk. So this breaks outside of obviously just being from Fallen Empires. And we've got zombies, elder dragons, and then we've got some stunt decks, which nowadays I suppose would be called a combo deck. So Knight of the Ninja, Erosion, Morph, Aikido, Big Balls of Fire, Can't Be Cured, Eureka, Living Pain, A Party at Mother's, and then we move on to the multiplayer decks. So like I said, these have a slightly variable deck size, so they tend to be on the higher side. So 72 in that deck, 74. These do come with sideboards as well. It'd be interesting with these. Yeah, so again, they're not. So these are not singleton formats, by the way. So it's not you couldn't really call it like proto EDH. It is multiplayer, but as you can see, there are multiple copies of things. But you could use them as a starting point for an EDH build, I suppose. Oh, there's extended. And then we have the Tempest decks, which were added just prior to publication. So Tempest wasn't out at the time that this book was put together, but these were put together by Watsy. And what's interesting with this is, so as I've said on numerous occasions, when Mirage came out, Mirage Block, there were no theme decks. It wasn't a thing. The only theme decks that were ever made were theme decks for Magic the Gathering Online. However, when Tempest came out, that was the introduction of the theme decks. And what's interesting is when you look through this, it's interesting to see what ones of these actually did go on to become theme decks or close to the theme decks in Tempest. You can see there's a one called Deep Freeze here. There's not many. But yeah, I really enjoy this book. It's not always for everyone's taste, but what I like about it, I think, is that it captures a really interesting period in Magic. There's that period from, of rotation, from when Ice Age was rotating out. We'd had the full Mirage block released and 5th edition, and then Tempest was just about to rotate in, And then alongside that, all the quirky things in here, like, you know, what essentially is Pauper, but just done with 5th edition, which is, you know, if you ever get a chance to do that, it's great fun. 5th edition's a huge set, and you can have lots of fun just within 5th edition, I think. And then of course you've got all the what is it? I always get the two muddled up. Was it Homelands? Yeah. I should have. Actually, rather than try and do that because my fingers are really hurting. Where was it? Theme. I'm sure it was there. There we go. Fallen Empires. It's alright. I always get the two confused. Fallen Empires and Homelands. So yeah, these are all Fallen Empires decks. I don't know why they did this. For each one they just reproduced the story again and again and again. So the actual section that's unique for each of these is pretty small. But I do love that they've gone to the they got to the point where they've actually just from the set, and they've also got a sideboard as well. And it's quite fun, I think, to, and this is one way. So a couple of ways I've used this book actually. One is I've actually built, like I say, I'm not sure how many, whether I did 2 or 4 of the 5th edition common decks, and they're quite fun to play against one another. Another thing is to take those decks and project them into the future, or do with the ones here that we were just flicking through, Fallen Empires, is take those and do a similar thing but for other sets, like, you know, to try and pick a set and yeah, just maybe do it in each colour or in 2 colour decks, and try and build decks just exclusively with cards only from that set, but along sort of simmerish themes, or themes that were particular for that colour or colour combination. So hopefully you've enjoyed that additional flip through this deck. It makes me certainly want to go away and have a play around with some of the decks in here, just purely on Architect or somewhere like that. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in the next video.